The training grounds of the Galactic Academy stretched wide beneath the twin suns, with dust rising in thick clouds as cadets of many species clashed, trained, and tested their limits. Under the watchful eyes of instructors, machines hummed in the background, sparring drones darted through the air, and the sound of metal against metal echoed across the field. Dozens of alien species filled the space, towering insectoids with hard shells, fast reptilian warriors with quick reflexes, and massive four-armed giants whose strength shook the ground. In the middle of all this stood a human cadet named Daniel. Compared to the others, he seemed unimpressive. His frame was smaller, his strength weaker, and his speed nothing remarkable. Aliens often whispered among themselves, calling humans fragile and soft. Many wondered why Earth had even sent cadets to this academy, where only the strongest survived. Daniel had heard these whispers before, but he stayed quiet and focused, determined to prove himself in his own way. The day's training began with endurance trials. Cadets had to run through a gauntlet filled with heavy obstacles, moving machines, and crushing pressure fields. Daniel pushed forward with the others, his face pale but his eyes firm as the reptilians darted ahead and the giants smashed obstacles out of their way. Daniel fought to keep pace. His breathing grew heavy, sweat ran down his forehead, but he refused to stop. The instructors shouted commands, their voices booming while drones recorded every moment. The aliens laughed, seeing him stumble, calling him slow, weak, and unworthy, but Daniel did not answer. He kept running step after step, forcing his body forward like a machine running on sheer willpower, not strength. Then disaster struck during a climbing drill. A massive training drone spun too close and smashed into Daniel's leg with bone-shattering force. The crack was audible across the field. Daniel's leg bent in a way it was not meant to, and he fell hard to the ground. A sharp cry left his lips, but he bit it down to a groan. The crowd gasped. Aliens muttered among themselves, some pointed, shaking their heads, saying this was the end. No fragile creature could survive such an injury. The instructors shouted for medics as Daniel clutched his leg. His fellow cadets stared, some with pity, some with mocking grins. Everyone expected the same thing, that the human would be carried away broken and defeated. But then something happened. Daniel took a deep breath, his face twisted in pain, and slowly he pushed himself up. His leg, clearly broken, shook violently as he tried to put weight on it. The medics ran forward, shouting at him to stay down, but Daniel waved them off. He gritted his teeth, his eyes burning with stubborn fire, and placed one step forward. The pain was blinding. His body screamed for him to stop, but he refused. His jaw tightened as sweat poured down his face and veins stood out on his skin. He limped forward, dragging himself across the field step by step. The crowd fell into stunned silence. Every eye locked on him. The insectoids stopped hissing. The reptilians froze. Even the giants, who mocked humans daily, said nothing. Daniel ignored the shouting of instructors, ignored the rush of medics, and ignored the disbelief around him. He walked on one broken leg, determined to finish the path. The silence of the field was broken only by his uneven steps. Thud, scrape, thud, scrape. His body trembled like it would collapse at any second, but his spirit drove him forward with every step. The whispers of aliens grew louder, but they were no longer mocking. They were confused. They were unsettled. They had seen warriors fall from smaller injuries, yet this fragile human walked on as if pain meant nothing. An insectoid cadet whispered with fear, "What is he made of?" A reptilian hissed, "That is not normal." The giants, who once laughed, clenched their fists in unease. Daniel moved through their stares without faltering. One alien commander, known for his harsh tongue and his habit of mocking humans, stood at the front watching Daniel. He was a tall, scaled warrior with scars across his chest, his voice usually sharp and cruel. He had insulted humans many times before, calling them weak bags of flesh that broke too easily. But as he watched Daniel march across the field on a shattered leg, his sneer faded, his eyes narrowed, and for once his mouth remained shut as Daniel dragged himself across the last stretch of ground. Collapsing only after he had finished the drill, the commander finally whispered in disbelief, "What kind of creature refuses to fall?" Daniel lay on the ground, his body shaking from agony, but a faint smile touched his lips. He had not run the fastest, he had not lifted the heaviest weights, nor fought the hardest duels, but in that moment, in front of the galaxy's strongest cadets, he had shown something none of them could ignore. He had shown a will that would not break even when his body did. The instructors exchanged looks, realizing they had just witnessed something rare and dangerous. They saw a truth about humans that few in the galaxy had ever understood. Humans could be fragile, but when pushed to the edge, they could endure the impossible. Daniel had not just shocked his fellow cadets. That day he had planted a seed of fear and respect that would grow far beyond the training grounds of the academy. "You said," The medical wing of the Galactic Academy was a place of cold white walls, humming machines, and glowing scanners. Daniel lay on a bed, his leg tightly wrapped in a glowing brace designed to repair bone at accelerated speed. The medics scolded him for refusing immediate care, but Daniel barely listened. His mind replayed the moment over and over. The stunned silence, the whispers, the alien commander's voice filled with something he had never expected. Fear. The injury throbbed with pain, yet deep inside he felt a quiet pride. He had shown them something no alien had expected from a human. He had walked on when his body screamed to collapse. He had not fallen. Across the academy, the story spread like wildfire. Cadets whispered in the mess hall, in the training fields, and even in their private quarters. The insectoids clicked nervously, saying no shell beast could endure such pain. The reptilians hissed that it was unnatural. The giants argued that brute strength was nothing if it came without unbreakable spirit, and in every corner of those conversations the name Daniel was repeated, the human who walked on a broken leg. Some cadets laughed nervously, others avoided his gaze, and a few began to watch him with respect and unease. For the first time, humans were no longer dismissed as fragile weaklings. They had become a question, a mystery. Meanwhile, Daniel's instructors debated behind closed doors. Some argued he was reckless for ignoring medical orders. Others said his endurance revealed something dangerous. The alien commander, who had once mocked him, now sat silently, his eyes troubled. He remembered battles he had fought where warriors stronger than Daniel had fallen after one wound, yet the human had endured with nothing but willpower. It disturbed him, because it meant humans might carry something the galaxy had overlooked, something no weapon could measure. Back in the medical bay, Daniel tried to stand again. The machines beeped in protest. The medic shouted at him to lie down, but he clenched his teeth and rose anyway. His leg trembled, but the brace held firm. Sweat ran down his forehead, but he refused to look weak. The medic sighed, exasperated. "Why do you humans always fight the impossible?" Daniel gave no answer. He simply said quietly, "Because if we stop fighting, we lose." His words lingered in the air. The alien medic, suddenly unsure how to respond. That evening, the academy arranged a combat exercise, one where injured cadets were excused. Daniel, however, refused the exemption. He limped onto the training grounds with his glowing brace, shocking every cadet who thought he would be confined to bed. The crowd whispered again, his legend growing in real time. Instructors frowned, warning him to withdraw, but he only tightened his grip on the practice blade. His eyes carried the same fire as before, not the fire of arrogance, but of stubborn willpower. When the duel began, his opponent, a towering reptilian, lunged at him with speed. Daniel was slower, weaker, and clearly in pain, yet each time he was knocked down, he stood again. Each strike that sent him stumbling only fueled his determination. The reptilian grew frustrated. His claws slashed, his tail whipped, but the human refused to fall. Daniel's body was battered, bruised, and bleeding, yet still he stood. His broken leg screamed in agony, but he moved with sheer force of spirit. Around them, the crowd grew restless, watching the impossible unfold. Finally, the reptilian roared, furious, and slammed Daniel to the ground. But even then, Daniel pulled himself up on one knee, raised his weapon, and prepared to keep fighting. The silence was deafening. Instructors exchanged glances, some shaken, others amazed. The alien commander stared, unblinking, his thoughts dark with confusion and respect. At last, the match was called off, not because Daniel surrendered, but because the instructors feared what would happen if it continued. Daniel's body was a mess, but his spirit remained unbroken. He stood panting, eyes burning like fire, and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear, "I will not fall." The cadets left in silence, whispering among themselves. The reptilian who fought him avoided Daniel's gaze, ashamed, not because he lost, but because he realized no victory against such will could ever feel complete. That night, across the academy barracks and halls, one question spread louder than before: what are humans really made of? Suspense. And a transmission reached the academy from the Galactic High Command. They had heard of the human cadet who refused to fall, and they demanded to see him themselves. Daniel's story was no longer confined to whispers. It was about to echo across the galaxy. The summons from Galactic High Command spread through the academy like a storm. Every cadet, every instructor, every alien officer whispered about it. The humans had always been seen as minor recruits, fragile bodies with limited power, barely worthy of the Academy's harsh standards. Yet now one human was being called before the most powerful council in the galaxy. Daniel walked slowly toward the grand chamber, his brace still glowing on his injured leg. His uniform was wrinkled from constant training. His face pale from pain, but his eyes were sharp in the corridors. Alien cadets watched in silence. Some stared with awe, others with fear. A few muttered insults, but none dared step in his path. The chamber itself was enormous, vast pillars stretching up to a dome where holograms of the High Command shimmered above. Their voices rumbled in unison, ancient alien tongues that shook the air. Daniel stood in the center alone, surrounded by hundreds of alien eyes. The lead hologram, a towering warlord with 4 horns and glowing red eyes, spoke first. His voice echoed like thunder. "Human, explain yourself. Why did you refuse medical order? Why did you rise again and again when your body was broken?" Daniel took a slow breath. He was nervous, but he refused to show weakness. His voice was steady when he answered, "Because surrender is worse than pain. Because if I fall without trying, then I am already defeated." The words were simple, plain, even childlike compared to the grand speeches aliens expected, yet the chamber fell silent. No one laughed. The words struck deeper than Daniel realized. The council members exchanged low murmurs. Some called his behavior reckless, some feared it revealed something dangerous. They argued humans were unpredictable, that their refusal to accept limits could make them dangerous allies, or even worse, dangerous enemies. Yet others whispered that such willpower was what every warrior sought, that perhaps humans were not weak, but something entirely different, something the galaxy had not yet understood. As the council debated, Daniel remained still. His leg trembled, but he did not shift his weight. His jaw was tight, his eyes focused ahead. Every cadet watching through the broadcast felt uneasy. The insectoids buzzed quietly, saying no creature should endure such pain. The reptilians hissed that it was unnatural. The giants spoke in hushed tones, wondering what kind of species could keep rising when even death seemed near. At last, the horned warlord silenced the chamber. "Human," he said slowly, his eyes narrowed. "You claim strength is not in muscle, but in refusal to surrender. Prove it. Show us again." The order echoed through the hall. Daniel felt his heart pound. The chamber floor shifted, plates sliding aside to reveal a combat platform rising into the center. Weapons glowed, racks opened, and shadows of training beasts stirred. Daniel realized this was no ordinary test. They were pushing him to his limit. The crowd leaned forward, voices rising. Aliens whispered this human would surely fall. No one could endure twice what he had already faced. Yet Daniel tightened his grip on the practice blade. His broken leg screamed with pain. His chest burned, but he lifted the weapon and nodded. "I will fight." The platform lit with burning light as the first training beast, a massive armored drone with blades for arms, charged forward. The sound of steel on steel rang across the chamber as Daniel blocked with trembling arms. His body was weak, but his spirit forced him forward. Each time the drone struck, he staggered, but rose again. Blood ran from his arm, his leg buckled, but still he fought. The aliens watching grew restless. Whispers turned into gasps when Daniel dodged a killing strike. By sheer will, not skill, his movements were slower, but there was fire in every step, fire that no one understood. Finally, with one desperate push, he drove his blade into the drone's core. Sparks erupted, and the machine collapsed. The chamber fell into silence once more. Daniel stood gasping, his brace cracked, his body shaking, yet he raised his blade high, refusing to fall. The High Command stared at him no longer with amusement, but with a mix of fear and respect. The horned warlord leaned forward, his voice low. "Perhaps humans are not fragile, perhaps they are dangerous." Suspense end. Back in the shadows, unseen by Daniel's secret envoys, transmitted the entire fight across distant colonies. Soon billions would see the human who refused to surrender, and in the dark corridors of power, alien leaders whispered one chilling question: if one human cadet could endure this, what would an army of them be capable of? The footage of Daniel's defiance spread faster than fire across dry fields. Entire colonies replayed the image of the human cadet rising again and again when his body should have collapsed. In the distant mining worlds, insectoid workers stopped their drills just to watch. In the icy markets of the reptilian clans, traders froze before glowing screens. Their voices were uneasy. If a single human could endure such agony, what would happen if an army of them was unleashed? Some feared it, others admired it. And everywhere the same question spread through whispers: what are humans really? Inside the academy, Daniel became a living rumor. Aliens followed him with their eyes in the hall. Some avoided him, as if he were dangerous. Others stepped aside with unexpected respect. A few even tried to test him by throwing subtle insults or shoving him, but Daniel never reacted. He simply kept walking steady on his broken leg. The whispers grew louder. Humans were no longer invisible, no longer dismissed as fragile recruits. They were suddenly a puzzle, a threat, or perhaps even something greater. The instructors too began to shift. At first they mocked him and warned others not to follow his example, calling him reckless. But as more reports from colonies arrived praising the human spirit, the instructors began to watch Daniel differently. Some pushed him harder in drills, expecting him to break again. Others studied him, quietly measuring his tolerance. His every move became a lesson. His stubborn will turned into a symbol. The academy had trained thousands of species, yet none had ever seen a cadet stand up broken and refuse surrender. One night, as Daniel sat alone in the barracks, his leg bound in fresh bandages, a voice broke the silence. It was Koresh, a towering reptilian cadet, known for his cruelty. He had once laughed at Daniel for being weak, but now Koresh's tone was low, almost uncertain. Human, he said slowly, when you stood with your leg shattered, what did you feel? Were you afraid? Daniel looked up, meeting his cold yellow eyes. His answer was quiet but clear. Yes, I was afraid, but I chose to move anyway. Koresh's scales rippled uneasily. The idea of walking through fear rather than crushing it was alien to him. He left without another word. Yet by the next morning the whispers spread again. Aliens claimed the reptilian had asked the human for wisdom, something unthinkable. Only days earlier Daniel did not boast. He trained as before, silent, determined, but his silence only made the mystery grow. The Galactic High Command, however, was not silent. Reports from the Academy reached every corner of their empire. Leaders argued fiercely. Some wanted humans watched closely, or even restricted, fearing their willpower could spark uprisings. Others insisted humans were valuable allies and should be recruited into elite forces. The debate deepened as envoys from rival empires sent questions. What was this new species that refused to break? Could they be used, or must they be feared? Meanwhile, Daniel faced new trials. The Academy arranged endurance tests harsher than ever before. Long marches across deserts, combat drills in frozen tunnels, simulations of battles meant to crush morale. Every time Daniel's body staggered, every time his bones screamed with pain, yet he never stopped. Even when he collapsed, he forced himself to rise. The alien cadets who once sneered now stared in silence. Some even began imitating his refusal to quit. The most shocking moment came during a joint drill, when an explosion trapped several cadets beneath debris. Medics declared them finished and ordered others to retreat, but Daniel staggered forward, ignoring orders. He crawled through fire, dragging stone off alien bodies one by one. He burned his hands, blistered his skin, and nearly collapsed, yet he kept pulling them free until all were safe. The rescued cadets could not believe it. The human had risked everything, not for glory, but because he refused to let them die. Suspense ended that night. While the rescued cadets slept, Daniel sat alone, staring at the stars. His body was broken again, but his spirit blazed across the galaxy. In hidden rooms far away, alien leaders watched the recordings in silence. The question had changed now. It was no longer, what are humans, but what will they do next? Whispers about Daniel's impossible endurance turned into storms across the galaxy. Entire councils debated him in secret chambers. Some leaders called humans reckless creatures of chaos who would bring ruin. Others saw them as unstoppable allies capable of turning wars. Medias across colonies replayed the same image again and again. The fragile-looking human cadet walking on a broken leg, refusing to surrender. Soon, alien children copied the act on playgrounds, limping with sticks, pretending to be human soldiers. Parents frowned uneasy, but their eyes betrayed a strange respect. The myth of the human will was spreading faster than anyone could contain. Inside the academy, Daniel trained harder than ever, though his body bore scars from endless drills. His silence became heavier than words. Aliens who once mocked him now watched him closely. Some saluted when he passed, others whispered blessings. Some even asked him to teach them how to endure pain. His answer was always simple: you keep moving. But behind his calm eyes he carried questions of his own. Why did he keep standing when his body demanded rest? Was it pride, duty, or something deeper? He did not know yet. Each day he rose again, driven by a fire that none could explain. One day, the Academy gathered all cadets for a survival test on a hostile moon. The environment was brutal, storms of acid wind, creatures lurking in shadows. The cadets were told to survive a week with little supplies. Alien squads quickly scattered into groups using their own strategies. Daniel walked alone, moving slowly, but steadily. His body was weak, yet his eyes never wavered. In the storm, his uniform burned holes in his skin, yet he pressed forward. When predators struck, he fought with rocks and bare hands, refusing to retreat. Aliens watching from drones gasped. Some squads with advanced weapons failed, while the humans simply refused to fall. By the third day, Daniel's body collapsed in the storm. His breath came in shallow bursts, his skin torn and burned. Yet when dawn came, he pushed himself up again, dragging his wounded body across the barren ground. His defiance inspired other squads that were ready to quit began standing again, copying his stubborn march. The storm broke bones and burned flesh, but cadets survived because they saw one human refusing surrender. The instructors stared in disbelief. The human was not just surviving, he was teaching endurance without words. When the test ended, most cadets had failed, but Daniel remained standing, bruised, bleeding, and burned. His body shook with exhaustion, yet he did not fall. The alien commander, known for mocking humans, approached slowly. His voice lacked mockery. Now it carried something closer to awe. "You should be dead," he said. Daniel only gave a tired smile. "Maybe, but not today." The silence that followed was heavier than any speech. Even the commander bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the human spirit. Across the galaxy, the survival test footage ignited chaos in rival empires. Some feared humanity could not be conquered. In others, young warriors demanded to train beside humans to learn their secret. Willpower became the word tied to earth, a word sharper than any blade. Suspense ended that night as Daniel lay in his bunk wrapped in pain. A message arrived from the Galactic High Command. A new trial awaited him, not just for training but for something greater, a trial that could decide humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The message called Daniel to the heart of the Galactic Academy, a chamber where only the greatest trials were announced. The air was heavy with silence as thousands of cadets gathered around their commanders. The alien commander, who once mocked humans, stood at the center, his eyes fixed on Daniel. His voice echoed through the hall. "The High Command has chosen the human for the trial of endurance." Gasps rippled across the crowd. The trial was legendary, spoken of in whispers. It was not meant for beginners, not even for veterans. Only the strongest were allowed, and most never returned alive. Daniel walked forward slowly, his body still scarred from the survival test. The commander stepped aside, but his stare held something different now, respect, perhaps even fear. The trial would test not strength or speed, but spirit. It was said that those who entered were broken from within, that no one walked away unchanged. Yet Daniel only nodded once, his face calm. He whispered to himself, "If I can still move, then I am not done." The next morning, he was taken to a barren world covered in endless deserts and jagged mountains. No weapons, no food, no water, only a small device on his wrist to record his progress. Drones circled above, ready to broadcast his every step across the galaxy. Billions watched in silence as the human walked into the burning sand. The sun scorched the ground, the winds cut like knives. His body trembled with each step, but he did not stop. Hours turned into days, his lips cracked, his vision blurred, his wounds reopened, but each time he fell, he forced himself up. The galaxy watched in disbelief. Aliens whispered in their homes, "He cannot last another hour." Yet he lasted day after day. At night, predators came, but he fought them with stones and his bare fists. At dawn, the desert tore at his body again. Still, he moved, always forward. By the seventh day, the world expected to see him collapse forever. Even his enemies prepared speeches mocking humanity's failure. But then the drone showed something none could explain. Daniel crawling across the rocks, his body almost broken. He was not walking anymore. He was dragging himself forward inch by inch. His eyes burned with fire brighter than the suns above. He whispered through broken breaths, "Not yet, not yet." The galaxy trembled. At last he reached the marker of the trial, a small stone pillar standing against the endless desert. He touched it with bloody hands and pulled himself upright. Every drone froze on the moment. The human cadet stood swaying, but unbroken. The trial was complete. The galaxy erupted in shock. The commanders who once laughed at humanity now stood silent. Some even saluted the screen. Others simply whispered, "Impossible." Back in the academy, the alien commander waited as Daniel returned, carried on a stretcher. Yet when Daniel tried to rise again, the commander placed a hand on his shoulder. For the first time, his voice held honor. "You are not fragile, you are fire." Daniel only gave a tired smile and closed his eyes. Suspense and across the galaxy leaders met in secret council. Some feared humanity more than ever, others dreamed of alliances. A single question spread from world to world: what would humans do next if even death itself could not stop them?